And so today we have already arrived at week 3 of our Advent series. All is calm, all is bright. We have been moving through a time said to be that of expectation and preparation. An expectation that we will reawaken to the Christ presence in us at new and more profound ways this year, and doing what is ours to do in order to bring that spiritual presence within us into our conscious awareness and place it into conscious expression as we go about our days. In the first 2 weeks of the series, we called upon our divine attributes of faith and peace to help us keep our expectations high and also our preparations on track. And today we turn to love. And we do so in a very special way, the way of remembrance. A day that we pause to remember those who are no longer with us in physical form, those who the song before this lesson began said, have quote unquote gone home for Christmas, and yet whose love never leaves us, whose love absolutely never dies. The holidays can often trigger the grief that is in us. And so today is an opportunity to just allow ourselves to feel into, to be with any grief or sorrow that may be present around any number of losses, whether a loss of life or some other form that we've had in our lives. And these may be things that are from our past. They may also be in the form of, the many challenges that we have had in this year of 2020, things that have created some wounds or losses that are still quite raw and at the surface, and some may still even be in the process of forming. And of course, none of these more recent ones have had nearly enough time as yet to heal to any great degree. Now, some of you may have some special items nearby with you this morning that remind you of the losses that you feel. There might be some photographs that you have or objects that hold great sentimental value for you. Or maybe you have a candle that's nearby that is lit, or you might lit over the course of this, might light over the course of the lesson, reminding you of the special light that the someone in your life was. Or maybe today it would be symbolic of a light that you are affirming grows stronger and brighter as we move through and beyond so much of the darkness that has been this year. Others of you may simply be remembering and carrying losses in your hearts. What I know from officiating memorial services over so many years now is that it's sometimes in services like this that grief can arise unexpectedly. Grief that someone thought had been healed, and sometimes it's grief that shows up for the very first time. And so the overall invitation for today is to be gentle with yourselves, to know that this is a very sacred, very safe space that we are in, and that you are all surrounded with all of the love that we have intentionally shared in the service elements leading up to this lesson. You see, love was evoked in our centering statement of unity. It was offered throughout our opening prayer. Words of love were in the scriptural verse shared as we lit our Advent candle representative of love. Love was in the words and in the silence of our meditation. And of course, the unconditional love of Spirit is present, active, and alive in you. Now, my thought for today, given that we could not be together all in person, physically in person together, and having a collective ritual or ceremony of remembrance together, my thought is to share a little bit about grief, about its processes, and then offer a few moments within each one to allow each of us to just be in that sacred silence, to feel into whatever becomes present for us, and to remember whatever, whomever, it is ours to remember today. So perhaps the best place to begin is to just take a bird's eye view about grief. And I'd like to preface that by sharing something that was written by the late Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, someone whose life work centered in great part on the grieving process. And she wrote, "The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not, quote unquote, get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same, nor should you be the same, nor would you want to." Now, I wanted to offer her words as a means of emphasizing how important I believe it is for us to feel our grief, to feel our losses. And I also wanted to share them as a means of offering how important I also believe it to be for us to try to be aware of and acknowledge and respect and thereby validate the grief experiences of others. Now, it might seem logical that I might say that it's important for us to grieve in our times of loss, but it's not that easy for everyone to do. You know, some folks might come from families with, or maybe they just established, on their own practices that during times of loss consist of things like, putting on a smile, putting on, that brave face. And not only in the days immediately following the passing of someone, but also every single time the holidays and the special remembrance days associated with that person that fall throughout the course of the year come forth. Or sometimes there might be a sense of whether it's stoicism or martyrdom, or maybe just simply an inability to allow others to see you grieve publicly. A person can sometimes take it upon themselves and believe that if they don't cry, if they don't break down, then no one else around them will either. And so they bottle up and they stuff down that grief, thinking and believing that if they don't feel the pain, no one else will feel the pain either. And so, since it's hard enough for some to open those gates of grieving for themselves, it becomes just as important when they do, when anyone does, that the grief and the individual experience of it, as I said before, be acknowledged and respected and validated. Ms. Kubler-Ross used that phrase, "get over," in the writing that I shared. Have you ever been told to get over your grief? If you have, I imagine that it might have served to actually make it worse and make it harder. I was thinking back, and I think it's been at least 10 years, maybe 11, that the husband of one of my ministerial colleagues died. They were both ministers. They were co-leading a church at the time. And his death was very sudden, absolutely unexpected. And she was actually out of town traveling when she got the call that he had been found in their home. She still grieves for that man. And she does it very publicly and unabashedly so online. And at first, when I saw this grieving process unfolding and continuing for months and months into years online, I didn't understand it. But I knew that that was only because I know that I'm a fairly private person. I would put myself in that category of being someone where it's not automatic, it's not always easy for me to grieve and show my emotions and feel them in front of others. And I've just not had an experience that I could use to compare how she was expressing. What did bring understanding to me about the importance of another's process is when she began to share how many people had started to tell her to just get over it. Get over it already. It's been months, it's been years. Now, she alluded to how she separated herself from a few of those relationships. And to this day, she continues her process. She continues her remembrance of her husband and her process of grief in a way that speaks to her and speaks to the relationship that they shared. So let's hit the pause button here. I'd like to take us into our first entry into the silence. A time to allow everyone in your own ways to feel into grief itself. To just allow yourself a moment or two to see however it may be present in you today, how that might feel for you in this moment. Is there any resistance to it coming up? And perhaps to just offer yourself a heartfelt, pat on the back, a heartfelt validation of your own processes as they are or as they have been in times of loss in your life. And so let's do that now. Let's just gently move into a moment or two of silence. And so we just gently bless this time of silence and bring our awareness back to the present, back to each other. Another element of grief that I have found to be helpful when moving through times of loss is that of community. And community, it can show up in ways that are very planned and organized and what we might call the norm. It can also show up in ways that you may never know have occurred. I'm sure we're all familiar with the community that is a part of so many funerals and memorial services. It's when people arrange to have a time of gathering, a time of visitation before the services are offered. And in my family, that time of gathering could be 2 or 3 days leading up to the service. For others, it might be 2 or 3 hours the day of the service. And this is an element of grieving, a grieving process that has been so dearly missed this year. With so many services, having been not even held yet, services that have been delayed until maybe in the spring, possibly in the summer, and others that have been held virtually so often just did not allow for large in-person times of gathering together. We, we have often been community in times of grief. We have come together in support of congregants who have passed. We support their families or congregants who have lost someone dear to them. And not only through offering the memorial services themselves, but also, through, the provision and sharing of meals and food, phone calls and cards, the bereavement program that we have here at the church that stays engaged with a person for more than a year after they lose a loved one. And one quite unexpected community of grief showed up for me on my phone just this past week, just a couple of days ago. And it's a community of one, just one, but that one reaches worldwide because it's Santa Claus. It's Santa Claus. There was an article on the USA Today website about a program that's called USPS Operation Santa. And this is a program that accepts letters from children in need and then matches them with donors who then make their holiday wishes come true. And this program has been going on for 107 years. As I was reading the article, I realized that at a greater depth that our children may be grieving in their own way this year, whether they are intellectually or emotionally aware of it or not. You see, this year, it's been a bit of a different kind of Christmas. It's a different kind of Christmas. Caden is a fifth grader, and his letter to Santa said, I would do anything if you could somehow restart fifth grade with no COVID. So please, if you, the amazing Santa, could restart it, I would be happy. If you, Santa, could give Caden a do-over year for fifth grade, he would not be sad. Bartering, bargaining, it's one of the stages of grief set forth by Miss Kubler-Ross. Lily is a sixth grader. Now, letters to Santa, I mean, they usually begin, with something along the lines of, Dear Santa, I've been a good girl this year. Her letter began, I've not had a good year. My grandpa died, and I could not see him because of COVID. I miss him and his big hugs. But Santa, can you bring Grammy a puppy so she's not so lonely? A child feeling into her own feelings and recognizing, acknowledging, validating the grief that she could see in her Grammy. Now, there are also communities that gather that we may never know about and yet still receive their love, still receive their comfort in some way. And the best example I could think of to share from a personal perspective comes from the prayer chaplains and the teams of prayer chaplains from my former church in Overland Park, Kansas. When I first moved to Kansas in order to enter the seminary and I began attending that church, I inquired about their chaplain program because I was interested in joining it. I had come from Unity in Houston and I'd been a prayer chaplain there, and I wanted to continue that role of service in my life in this Overland Park church. And one of the things I learned about the program was that, and one of the acts of service of the team, which was not really a part of the program, it was not required, it wasn't included in their training processes or anything. This was something just freely, lovingly created and offered by the chaplains on their own. And what it was that whenever there was a memorial service being held at the church, the team would get together amongst themselves to assure that a group of them would be present at that service. And they did this whether they knew the person who had died or not, whether they had been associated with a ministry or not. It did not matter what day of the week the service was held, what time of day it took place. There were people who had even told their employers that when I get this call, I will be taking a personal day or a half vacation day, whatever it is, so that they could be there. It was something that they felt so strongly about, to just be present, to just be present and silently, prayerfully hold a space of peace and comfort and love for those who had just had their hearts broken. And so let's take our second pause here. And I invite us into another time of silence with this one, carrying the invitation for you to remember the ways that community has shown up for you in times of loss and sorrow and grief. Perhaps to bring back and remember the faces, maybe the organizations, words spoken, kind acts offered, all that contributed to supporting you as you traveled your own journeys through those times. And so we'll do that now as we return to the sacred silence. And as we come back again, we bless our time away and return to our gathering once more. And so the last element of grief that we'll spend some time with today is the remembrance as it pertains to how we honor, how we keep alive the legacies left by those who have died. When I plan a memorial service, I always ask the family, the friends, whoever it is that is planning it with me, those who have suffered the loss, I ask them, what was the person's legacy? How has your life been changed? How were you impacted because they were a part of your life? And when I offer the service and I speak to the legacy that has been shared with me, that's been left behind, I close those comments by offering to everyone who is there that one of the greatest ways that you can honor the legacy of a loved one is to continue living your lives and do so in ways that keep that legacy alive. For example, I heard a story once where a grandmother had lost a very young grandson. And this grandson just loved Spider-Man. And he had this vast collection of all different kinds of Spidey dolls, in his bedroom. Now, she couldn't do it on the first Christmas after he died, but on the second Christmas, she went out and she searched high and low to find the biggest Spider-Man doll that she could find, and she donated it to Toys for Tots. It was her way of remembering and passing on that grandson's joy that she could remember seeing in him, passing that on to some other child who might be feeling sad at Christmas that year. Another example is found in the title for this lesson today, A Place at the Table. Many people will set a place at the table for someone who is no longer with them. And very often they'll, maybe light a candle and just place it right in the center of the plate at that place setting. And at special times, especially times like Christmas and those special occasions when we can come together and gather around a table, they'll go around the table one at a time and just each person share one thing they loved about their loved one, or one thing that they really, really miss about them. Ways of reaffirming that person's eternal place in their hearts. Someone who is very present in my heart this morning is my dog, Michelle. She was pretty much solely responsible for opening a heart that had been locked shut for a long time. And she was a source of so much comfort, so much love, that unconditional love that our pets just give so freely through many times of personal sorrow. And for the 9 years that she was in my life, the first thing she did every single morning, including the last morning she was with me here, was to stand on over me as I lay in bed and just give me her version of a good morning. For the 6 years now that she's been gone, the first thing I do when I step out of my bedroom and I walk down my hallway and past her urn is to say good morning to her. We all have our own ways. We have our own ways of remembering, our own ways of processing, our own ways of honoring. And so, in our final time of silent reflection, I invite you to open your hearts to whatever memories want to say good morning to you today. We'll take maybe a little bit more time this time. And I encourage you to allow yourself a few moments of reconnecting with those who are gone, those who did change you so much that you would not choose for your life to be the same as Miss Kubler-Ross offered. And if losses of other forms arise, allow them to be as gently as you can. And again, just know that there is so much love surrounding you right now. And so we move into the silence one last time. As we bring ourselves back to this moment, I offer words from author Anne Royfee, who said that grief is in two parts. The first is loss, the second is the remaking of life. Sometimes, sometimes the remaking, it takes the form of gratitude for life and a commitment to continue living. And so very often that living is done in remembrance of those who are gone. A woman that I got to know and work with a little bit at Unity of Lawrence, also in Kansas, posted a beautiful prayer recently that she wrote about. She wrote about loss in so many different forms that we've experienced just this year. And her name is Cindy Novello. She's a wonderful writer, beautiful musician, string artist, and I offer her prayer to you as we close our lesson for today. Today, may I allow myself to grieve my losses, understanding just how important this is, without imposing a timetable upon myself for how long this grief might last, just giving it whatever time it needs. May I know that emotions will come and go, some uplifting, some quite challenging. May I greet each one with tenderness and care, holding them lightly as they move through my being. May I know that grief is a reflection of love for myself, for others, for the world. May I be grateful for the incredibly deep and broad range of human emotional experience, the ability to feel and know that these experiences are here to teach us how to live more fully. May I remember that this is life with all its beauty, all its sorrow, all its depth, its highs, its lows, its birthings and becomings, and the passings too. May I remember that each moment is sacred, every last bit of it. May I offer myself in gratitude to each and every day. May this be so for me, for you, for all beings. Amen. And God bless you.